The galaxy had never been silent. Even in its oldest ages, when stars were young and empires were still learning the difference between conquest and survival, there had always been noise, signals crossing the void, trade beacons pulsing, wars flaring and dying like brief, violent storms. Silence, true silence, was a myth told by philosophers who had never listened closely enough. Until the day humanity went quiet. For 3 standard cycles, the Sol systems transmitted nothing beyond routine navigation pings. No diplomatic traffic, no commerce, no cultural exports. To most of the galactic concord, it was a relief. Humans had arrived late to the interstellar stage, but they had arrived loudly, arguing in councils, questioning ancient laws, refusing to bow to hierarchies that had ruled for millennia. They were innovators, yes, but also unsettling. They smiled too easily. They joked during negotiations. They asked questions no one had thought to ask in 10,000 years. So when humanity withdrew inward, many assumed they had finally learned their place. The virile Dominion certainly believed so. The Dominion had ruled the Perseus Arm for 6,000 years. Their fleets were vast, their warriors bred for obedience and precision. Their doctrine was simple: weakness invited extinction. And in their calculations, humanity was weak, fractured by internal politics, scattered across too many worlds, reliant on diplomacy rather than domination. When a Dominion task force crossed into the outer human colonies, it was not an act of war in their eyes, it was a correction. 3 human worlds burned, not glassed, not annihilated, burned just enough to send a message. Orbital stations were dismantled, defense platforms were reduced to debris. A single Dominion cruiser remained behind, transmitting one message on all frequencies: submit to stewardship, resistance will be met with final measures. The Dominion expected panic, they expected pleas, they expected negotiators. They received silence. At the Galactic Concord, the reaction was muted. Some delegates expressed concern, others quietly approved. Humanity had been disruptive. Perhaps this would teach them restraint. The Concord issued a formal inquiry, drafted a resolution, and scheduled a debate for the next cycle. No one noticed that the human ambassador's seat remained occupied, the figure within it unmoving, eyes fixed forward, hands folded calmly. When the Dominion advanced further, seizing mining systems, blockading trade routes, the silence continued. Human fleets did not rush to defend their borders. There were no emergency broadcasts, no calls for aid. The Dominion interpreted this correctly, but not completely. Humanity was not afraid. Humanity was preparing. Deep within Sol space, beyond the familiar orbits and charted jump lanes, ancient structures awakened. Shipyards the size of moons disengaged from stellar shadows. Automated foundries ignited, their cores flaring as raw matter was torn from captive asteroids and forged into hulls thicker than battleship armor. AI logistics networks spun into full operation, calculating supply chains that span light years. This was not mobilization as the galaxy understood it. This was release. For centuries, humanity had built quietly. Every treaty signed had been paired with a contingency. Every peacekeeping mission had doubled as reconnaissance. Every civilian transport design had concealed scalable military architecture. Humans did not trust permanence, not borders, not alliances, not even their own governments. What they trusted was preparation. They called it the Ark Doctrine. Never again would humanity face extinction with empty hands. The first sign that something was wrong came from a Dominion scout near the edge of human-controlled space. Its sensors recorded gravitational distortions, hundreds of thousands of them rippling outward like a tide. The scout attempted to transmit. It never finished. Across the Concord, sensor arrays began to light up, jump points flared, not with the chaotic signatures of fleeing ships, but with perfect synchronization. Waves of vessels emerged, then waves behind them, and more behind those. 500,000 warships. Not drones, not outdated hulls dragged from reserve fleets. Warships. They came in formations that defied conventional doctrine, layered spheres of escort craft, massive carriers surrounded by lattices of destroyers, battleships whose silhouettes alone bent sensor readouts, energy signatures suggested power outputs rivaling small stars. Hull markings were minimal, clean lines, sharp geometry, and a single emblem repeated across the fleet. A blue-on-white circle, broken by a forward-pointing arrow. Humanity had not come to defend. Humanity had come to end the war. The Concord emergency session was called in chaos. Delegates shouted over one another as real-time feeds flooded the chamber. Species that had never known fear felt it coil tightly in unfamiliar organs. 500,000 warships was not a fleet. It was a statement. The human ambassador finally rose. "Members of the Concord," she said calmly, her voice carrying without amplification, "humanity acknowledges your presence." There was outrage, accusations, demands for explanation. She waited until the noise burned itself out. "You observed our silence," she continued. "You assumed it was weakness. You allowed an empire to test that assumption on our worlds." She gestured, and images filled the chamber: burned cities, shattered habitats, survivors standing amid wreckage. "We did not respond because this outcome was already calculated. Your inaction was noted." A virile delegate hissed in contempt, posturing. "Even if your numbers are accurate, no fleet can." The ambassador cut him off, not with anger, but with something far colder. "We are not deploying our fleet," she said. "We are unleashing it." On the battlefield, the Dominion learned the meaning of that distinction. Human warships did not advance in predictable lines, they folded space locally, appearing within optimal firing ranges without triggering traditional alarms. Electronic warfare units blanketed systems in cascading interference, not jamming signals but rewriting them. Dominion commanders found their own orders echoed back with subtle alterations, formations drifting, targeting solutions decaying by fractions of a second. Those fractions were enough. Human weapons were not louder or brighter than those of other powers, they were simply relentless. Kinetic lances punched through shields calibrated for energy weapons. Adaptive munitions altered composition mid-flight. Swarms of autonomous craft learned enemy patterns in real time, evolving tactics faster than biological crews could react. The Dominion fought as it always had: bravely, efficiently, disastrously. Entire battle groups vanished, not in spectacular explosions, but in controlled annihilations that left debris fields drifting silently. Human ships advanced through the wreckage without slowing, their formations tightening, refining. It became clear within hours, this was not a campaign. It was an execution. Across the galaxy, observers watched in terror. Ancient powers that had crushed rebellions and erased civilizations realized, too late, that humanity had studied them all. Their doctrines, their psychology, their assumptions. Humans had not needed to surpass the galaxy's greatest fleets. They had only needed to understand them better than they understood themselves. Within a single cycle, the Dominion's core systems were surrounded. 500,000 warships formed a sphere so vast it eclipsed stars. Planetary defenses powered down, one by one, as human targeting arrays locked on with surgical precision. The Dominion's high strategist transmitted a final message: "We surrender." The human response was immediate. Accepted. No conditions, no demands for tribute, no occupation fleets descending to rule. Instead, human ships deployed containment grids, neutralizing weapons, securing orbital space. Relief vessels followed, medical ships, reconstruction platforms, engineers. Human diplomats arrived alongside soldiers, not behind them. The galaxy struggled to understand. At the Concord, the ambassador spoke again. "We did not build this fleet to conquer," she said. "We built it because history taught us a simple lesson: mercy without strength is an invitation to extinction." A delegate from an ancient empire asked, quietly, "Why show us this? Why not rule?" The ambassador met his gaze. "Because now you know," she said. "You know what it costs to threaten us. You know what restraint looks like when it is chosen, not forced." She paused, letting the weight of 500,000 warships settle over every listener. "The galaxy trembled today not because humanity is cruel," she finished. "It trembled because it realized we have been patient." Across the stars, human fleets did not linger, they withdrew in disciplined waves, vanishing back into the void from which they had come. Systems stabilized, trade resumed. The Dominion, humbled but intact, began rebuilding under Concord oversight. And in quiet halls and hidden councils, ancient powers rewrote their doctrines. Silence returned to the galaxy, but now it was different. Now, when humanity was quiet, everyone listened. Because they understood, at last, what waited behind that silence. And they prayed it would never be unleashed again.